The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition. It is June 6th, 2014. On tonight's live edition, I'm going to be getting into the attack on the U.S.S. Liberty again. And I am honored, and I mean that word, with every bone in my body. I am honored to welcome back to the broadcast tonight a very good friend of mine, a fellow veteran, and one of the survivors of the U.S.S. Liberty. And his story is one of the most powerful ones you could possibly hear because he was the most injured survivor there was. My good friend, Mr. Richard Larry Weaver. Richard, welcome back to the broadcast, brother.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I know this is a tough subject to talk about any time of the year, but especially coming up on the anniversary of the attack on the Liberty. And before we get into it, I just wanted to, I know you wanted to take a minute, too, to recognize what today is, the anniversary day.
I want to mention that those who know, and I'm sure there's a lot, maybe some younger that don't, that today is D-Day, and I want to send out all my appreciation for the sacrifice that those men and women made on behalf of our freedom of this nation and not only this nation but other nations, and that they laid down their lives for us. And I also want to add that the country that they were fighting for its freedom, the United States of America, was an entirely different country then. It has changed so much in so many ways, and they sure aren't all good. But I want to thank you so much and the families that lost loved ones. And I also want to throw out about my dad. He was boots on the ground in the Battle of New Guinea and the Battle of New Britain in the Pacific, and he saw his share of hell. And thank you, Dad.
And thank you, Richard. Thank you for, you survived hell, and thank you for having the courage to talk about it. and scream it from the mountaintops all these years, and put up with the harassment and stuff that all you guys that survived the Liberty too. I want to give you a big thank you. You guys deserve it more than anybody. You haven't heard it enough from anybody in this country. Most people don't even know about the Liberty. I mean, a much larger portion know now than they ever did before, but still, not enough people know about the U.S.S. Liberty. I know veterans, Navy vets, never heard of it. Never, ever heard of the ship. Ever. So, thank you, and thank you for having the courage to talk about it, brother. I know it's not easy by any means. That being said, it's June. It's that time of the year, and before we get sidetracked, because I know I'm going to give the floor to Richard, and I'm going to have him tell the whole story. It's not really getting sidetracked. Before we get into it, I want to just mention that this Sunday there will be in Washington, and I have the details up on Facebook. I'll make sure I get them because we're going to get into detail about some of this stuff later on about the modern day things going on that kind of this we're going to get into the Bo Bergdahl thing, and we're going to get into the second hour, and I'm going to give out all the information for the event towards the end of the broadcast to remind everybody. But I just want to let everybody know, if you're in the D.C. area, there is an event this Sunday going on for the anniversary of the U.S.S. Liberty. So that being said, Richard, it's June 8th, 1967. We're on deck of the ship, and if I remember correctly, you were on watch. So take us to where you were and pick it up from wherever you want. Tell us your story.
Okay, I was on the morning watch, which is 8 in the morning to 12 noon, and I was on the last leg of the watch. I was up on the bow as lookout, and I, noticed that, either 3 or 4 high-speed jets circling us in a very big circle, and they did that about 3 or 4 times that I saw, and then they took off, and I was still up on the bow, and then I saw this boxcar, which is sort of a weird looking plane, but it's sort of shaped like a box, and that was about half the elevation of what the jets were flying at. Anyhow, it came time after that, it was time for me to be relieved, so I was relieved, and I was coming back the catwalk, and I noticed this, as I always said, this bucket of bolts, because that's what it looked like, plane coming toward the Liberty, and very close, because it's hard to conceive, but it looked like it might hit one of our masts, and it banked, and anyway, I looked up, and I saw the window open on the co-captain, and his head was at the window, and he smiled, and that close, I always said, I could see how bright his teeth were. So I put my hand up, and I waved to him, and he waved back with a big smile, and as it passed by, behind the starboard wing, there was a big Star of David. Well, in my heart, I had sort of a good feeling about that, because I knew they were an ally, and we were, like 14 miles out to sea in international waters, but we could still see the smoke billowing up, from the war that was going on over in the Cyanide, and, with the 6-day war, and anyhow, I felt gratified that was an ally. And I went back to the docks because I had some dizzy spells when I was steering the ship, and he just told me to come back and he'd check my ears out. Well, anyhow, I got back there, and I guess it was after chow, and then I, sitting up on the table, and Doc was taking a look, and on the 1MC, which is the intercom, they said, stand clear of the motor whaleboat. Or they're going to check the engine. And, it's just something they do to keep the engine turned over and free. Anyway, Doc and I heard this rat-tat-tat-tat right up the bulkhead. And I turned to Doc and said, Doc, the damn prop just flew off that motor whaleboat. And then they come over the 1MC. They go to general quarters. General quarters, this is not a drill. It's not a drill. We're under attack. And I was right below my GQ station where the dock was. And I got to the ladder and went right up. And our captain, he would just drill us so much in general quarters. And we all agree that that's another thing that saved the ship. We were so not bored with it, but boy, he was relentless. And thank God he was. Well, anyway, I went up, and you always check in when you get there, and I always wanted to beat my time, no matter where I was in the ship. But I thought, I'm going to have a good time because it was so close. And I checked in. I was a telephone talker with the bridge. And this was secondary con, which was out in the middle of an old helicopter pad. And there's a ship wheel there, and a compass, and a place for me to plug in my headphones, and then there'd be a person to steer the ship, and I would take care of the orders from the bridge, and then the first class was sort of the officer of the deck, that he would initiate what he would need done back there. And I always thought it was sort of, I guess, redundant is the word, that they have us out in the middle with no protection, and we're there in secondary con in case the bridge gets blown apart. Well, my God, if the bridge is going to be blown apart, we're sure not going to be there either. Anyway, we survived the first strafe, and I told Fred, we got to get down now into this offset. And the first class told me, you don't go anywhere without the orders of the captain. And I told him, do you want to listen in this earpiece and hear the chaos that's going on the bridge? And I said, I know our captain, and he would want us to do whatever it took to survive. So I got Fred, and we both jumped down. And the first class stayed up there, and I was told later that either the next strafe or the next one after that he was cut in half. When we landed down there, I still had 35 feet of cord. I could still hear the bridge, and I saw Fred, running toward the back of the ship, and I was concerned he was going to just jump the ship because, we both lost it, but yet I think he lost it just a little bit more. It didn't mean I'm stronger and he's weaker or anything like that. But when this kind of thing is happening to you, there isn't anybody out there that's going to know how you respond until it happens. I'll share that with you. So I grabbed him by the collar and I threw him back in the corner. And I was in pretty good shape because I was working out on the Liberty's weight room, preparing to, when I got separated, because I was a short timer, to go to Cypress Gardens. They were going to have me audition to become a professional water skier, and I really felt that I had the talent to make that. So anyhow, I was pretty strong. So I threw him in the corner, and then a jet was diving on us, and I just got on top of him to hold him down. And then I would come out and check which way the jet was coming in, because they had, like I said, 3 or 4 of them. And I got to add right now that they were completely camouflaged. I mean, I could not tell if they were Russian or who they were. I had no idea. I just know they weren't friends. And I come out and check, and I would throw Fred over in the opposite corner, so we'd have the angle of the corner to help protect us, that maybe they wouldn't see us, or at least maybe not get hit by rocket and cannon fire. And I did this, I don't know, I'm guessing 5 to 7 times, and all the while, protecting Fred with my body. And I come out one time, and I come out too soon. Oh, I got to mention one thing. They say about no flag, whatever they want to say, the enemy, Israel. But I did have a hard time sometimes seeing the next attacking plane because the American flag was flying full out and it was blocking the attacking plane. So I had to move over so I could see what angle he was coming in from because our flag was in the way. So that's just the way it is. There was a flag. And they were shot down. They kept putting flags up and ended up putting a holiday flag up eventually. Anyway, I come out too soon. And as I said before, this might be hard to believe, but this is just a fact that the pilot came in and he looked down, he saw me and I saw him at the apex of his dive, and right after that he went straight aft. And he had to communicate with the other fighters what he was doing because he'd have ran right into him if he'd have went down, flipped that, and came up the middle. And that's what he was going to do. I just knew it. So I got Fred, and I got him behind this big motor for the laundry. And I screamed at him and yelled that he would really listen, you know, and he did. He stayed there. And I told him he's coming up the middle, and I looked around for a place that I could get protection. And there was only this ship's cleat that you tie up with it. It wasn't much protection, but I got in a fetal position. And it's amazing how during a hard time like this that you can find beauty. I looked up and I saw a brand new holiday flag. I think it's something like it was 12, 15 or something like that, 12 or 15 feet, flying out. And I just for that split second, oh my God, how beautiful that is against the Mediterranean blue sky. And then I closed my eyes and waited for hell's horror. And I didn't have to wait long. And I was hit by a rocket getting kind of far that blew me up in the air about 5 feet. And I come down, and then my earpieces were gone, and my helmet was gone, and a little I know at the time, I landed inside of my face, and I busted my nose, but that was the least of my worries because I had 140 shrapnel wounds all over my body, mainly on my right side. And I said 3 times, oh my God, I'm hit, oh my God, I'm hit, oh my God, I'm hit. And I looked down and I saw this big hole in my stomach that had a phosphorus fire ring where the hole was, and it was glowing. And that's what a phosphorus fire does. It doesn't burn like a flame. It just glows, and the human flesh smelled so terrible. And I was bleeding so badly, but yet I was really thankful. I was, because I used my own blood to put the fire out. And then I looked up, and Fred was coming from behind. And as I saved Fred's life, he saved mine, because I surely would have been killed by the next strafe if Fred wouldn't have come along and he helped get me up, because my right arm and my right leg were useless. And I said, get me to sick bay, Fred, and which sick bay wasn't very far. And he got underneath my shoulders and held me up and stabilized me to get in. And I remember dumb stuff happens, and it just does. I don't know if I hit on this last time, but we went to this one door, and Fred's holding me up by my right side, and I grabbed hold of the handle and pulled it, and I said, oh, F-U-C-K, it's the laundry, and shut it. It's crazy, but that's what happened. And then we got to the next door, a watertight door, and Fred opened it up and helped me over these two into these watertight doors, which have a rise of about 15 inches. You step over, he had to help me get in there. And Doc Kiefer was there, and then some corpsmen, and then they grabbed a hold of me and put me up on this stainless steel table for him to do triage on me or whatever. And blood was just shooting out of me everywhere, and especially out of my abdomen. And little did I know at that time that all of my ab muscles were blown out of my body, and also 2.5 foot of my colon. And the doc was working on me, and he was using those scissors to clamp off big bleeders and everything else. And doc said to me, "Okay, we move you, Weaver?" I said, "Yeah." Well, just at that time, as soon as he said that, a rocket came in in the ceiling at the left of us, and some shrapnel hit Doc in the stomach, and he put 4x4s on it. He never told anybody. He put a life jacket on to keep pressure on it, and he turned around, and every place that he worked on to stop bleeders, I was just gushing like crazy again. So he had to redo me to get me in some state that they could, put me down on the floor. And the only way I know how to tell what happened is to tell what happened. But when I was on the floor, and Fred was right by my side, by the way, taking care of me, I looked up, and the tray table that the doc was working on me was pulling my blood, and these corpsmen got these 10 paper towels, and there were other guys coming in with like arm or leg wounds or stuff like that, but the doc had to look at them, and they just took, because they were in a hurry, and they took those paper towels and just with big whoosh motions just wiped off that table, and all of my blood just splattered up on the deck, on the bulkhead. And there's no way I can describe what that does to a man inside, except, to tell the feeling I had at that time. And that was thinking that was part of me. And I naturally had concerns of how much I lost or whatever. But I was very intent in staying alive. I know that. And about that time, somebody got on the 1MC and told us, stand by for a torpedo attack on the starboard side. And I told Fred, I said, get a life jacket on me. Fred, I said, now. I said, because if they called abandoned ship, I said, I want to have a jacket. If he got one, he pulled the CO2 inflator, and when he did that, that strap that goes behind you, pulls, and then I just realized how much damage I had in my lower back and my back itself, how many wounds I had back there, that these other deep core wounds are really terrible. They're probably the worst, but it just kept adding pain on pain. And this is the only part of the story that I cannot recollect, is how I got I got to tell you what happened. The torpedo did hit, and it was like a giant grabbed a hold of the ship and just tossed it out, and it just rocked back and forth. And it just almost felt like we were going to roll over. And then it sort of stabilized and became to a list of a certain amount of degrees. And then I heard over 1MC, we were to abandon ship. And this part I don't recollect. I have been to specialists, Ed Kamani out here in Hawaii, who has made most of my story come to life in me. Because, I didn't know a lot of this, because your mind protects it, and that's what PTSD is. You don't know how to handle all this horror, because you don't know what it is. But once you go, and I had rapid eye and hand with EMDR, and he helped me, and there were several times that during the sessions, it was so powerful, I passed out, and my wife and him had to catch me before I hit the floor. But when I would come to, I had new film developed. Because Mr. Cabani would say, well, you were here, Richard, and so I said, oh, yeah, and then this happened, and then this happened, that I did not remember before. So this is the only part that just never got developed. I don't mean to skirt around all this, but I just wanted to tell you how PTSD really works in life. And anyway, somehow when they called abandoned ship, I must have hopped over those two watertight doors and got outside. I was by myself. I don't know where Fred went to, but I knew my life raft was on the starboard side forward.
Richard, I'm gonna interrupt us because the break is I can see the break is going to sneak up on us in a few seconds here. I want to pause it. I'm going to have you pause it right there. When we get back on the other side, ladies and gentlemen, I'll have him rewind about 30 seconds just so you can get we have full context. But basically, he's the ship just got hit by a torpedo. He's trying to survive. He's got wounds all over his body. Nightmare scenario. This is real. As I said in the advertisement for it on Facebook for the show tonight, this makes any action movie pale by comparison. This is reality. This is truth. It needs to be told. And this was done by one of our quote-unquote allies, by the way. We'll get into that too. Stay tuned. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Talking to Richard during the break, we were talking about PTS. I don't like to call it PTSD. I like to call it PTS because it's not really a disorder. Post-traumatic stress is a perfectly normal human response to a perfectly abnormal, horrific situation. And Richard brings up a really good point about understanding what it is and understanding what a person that has it is going through. They're disconnected, as I said. This is my way of putting it. Somebody with PTS is connected. They're disconnected from their nervous system, their body as a whole, their physical body as a whole, their central nervous system itself, and then their essence, and even to a certain extent, a part of their mind. And it takes a very long time sometimes, depending on the trauma that the person went through, to reconnect those things. And I think it's very powerful to hear from somebody that goes through that. And it's also important, Richard, for you to know that it's not abnormal to go through anything like that from someone that's had to deal with his own issues and stuff. It's not abnormal at all, brother. What you go through on a daily basis is completely normal. And if you didn't go through it, if you didn't experience the feelings that you feel, then I wouldn't think you were a normal human being. So don't you ever hold that against you. What you guys went through is just, it was hell on earth. So anyway, I do appreciate you bringing up the PTSD issue and talking about that and explaining to people. Like you were saying to me right before we came back in, when it hit you, like a lot of times when these memories hit you and you have one of these things develop, it's like you almost feel like electricity coursing through your body, right? And then you went down for the count that one time, at least?
Yeah. When I was first wounded, it just felt like I was almost like being electrocuted at the time and shaking, like a convulsion kind of thing when I was first hit. And you're trying to make sense of what's happening to you, and you just cannot. You cannot, and then that's when I hit the deck, and because people don't understand sometimes. They see all this special effects stuff, but percussion of a rocket, when it goes off, it has a blast, and that's what blew me up in the air 5 feet. That's what happened. No special effects about it. I didn't go 20 feet in the air like they show on TV or anything like that. This was just the actual power of the rocket blast.
And this is literally, you're already hit. You already have, what was it, 140 shrapnel wounds, you said? From...
Yes, that's according to my doctor on America. Doctor on America Pan.
So you're laying on the triage table bleeding out, and then you're hit a second time.
Yes, and the doc was too, and that's when he put that life jacket on himself and put 4x4s and never told anybody. He just kept working on men. And anyway, I said about they were doing a torpedo run to starboard and prepare for a torpedo attack. And I got Fred to put life jacket on, and the strap behind, I could just feel how badly wounded I was in the back. That my core was so messed up. I mean, when all your ab muscles are just completely ripped out of you, because the shrapnel is white hot, and it just literally cuts like razors, and that's what it's meant to do, and cuts that out, and then cuts 2.5 foot of your colon out. Naturally, that's a big pain and very traumatic. But then, on top of that, then when I found out about the pressure from the strap, how badly I was wounded in the back, on top of it. But along with that, and for you people out there, I am not forgetting you. Okay, I am going to remember you right now. That PTSD is not limited to combat. PTSD can come from rape. It can come from abuse. So many things in life. So there's a lot of you out there that are suffering with PTSD, that I recognize you for it. And that needs to be said and not be pitied, but get help with somebody that can do this EMDR. Ask about it and ask for the treatment. It will help you. Anyway, I ended up outside by myself, and Doc stuck a big piece of gauze in this big hole in my side, in my stomach. And I guess hopping, it must have come out, because I got outside and I was leaning against the rail, and like I said, my right arm was right hand mainly, but then my arm, I wasn't any good for gripping or anything like that, and my right leg was useless. The gauze must have come out, and I had to use my elbow and put it in that hole to keep my intestines from coming out and dropping on the deck. And like I said, I only had my left leg was, the only good leg, and my left arm. And thank God I was working out. Like I said before, in the gym and that, I was strong. And I was 21. And I knew I had to get to my life raft, and I put my foot in this trough that drains away like a freshwater wash down. When you wash the ship, it channels the water to go out, drains on the side. Well, I fit my foot inside that, and there was so much human blood on the deck that I was able to pull myself and slide my foot in that blood. And I was pulling myself forward as fast as I could, naturally. It probably wasn't very fast, but as fast as I could. And the blood being the lubricant that allowed me to do that. And the torpedo boat was coming up alongside, and I could hear the canister going off, and when it was hitting the bulkhead, it sounded like those big ball bearings in a pinball machine. It sounded like those hitting that bulkhead, out of a gun. And they were getting closer to me, and I was pulling as hard and fast as I could. And if you ever had one of those dreams that everything slows down and you're running and your feet are sliding and the monster's coming closer or whatever, that kind of a dream, well, that's what happened to me. You see, no matter how fast I tried to pull, it wasn't fast enough, and everything was slowed down. And then I finally got to the point that I got behind a support for the bridge. And as he went by, so he didn't get to hit me. And anyway, I had just a little bit more to go, and I was at my life raft. And during general quarters, you do it so much, abandoned ship, man overboard, all the different drills you go through, that it's a tape in your mind, and you just boom, you do it without thinking. That's the whole idea of those drills. And I got to my life raft, and I'm standing there holding the rail with my left arm and looking up, and it's on fire. I was out of tape. We weren't drilled, and what do you do if your life raft's on fire and it's an abandoned ship? And I was standing there, and I felt somebody's presence to my left. I didn't look over and see who it was or anything, but I was standing there. But you know how when you're standing close to somebody, you can feel them. Well, anyhow, there was incoming from a torpedo gunboat from a cannon fire. And I just knew something was coming, and you have a feeling it's coming, and I don't know how, but you do. And all of a sudden, I felt this splatter, and I didn't know if I was hit again or what, because I was bleeding so bad, and then I didn't know if I was having that much pain that I couldn't process anymore. But anyhow, when that happened, I just my left foot sort of lost its footing, and I was holding on the rail, and I hopped up, and I come down. And when I came down, my foot landed on the skin of the calf of the man that was next to me. The only thing that was left was the calf and his ankle and foot. He was gone. I'm sure parts of him blew right off the ship, but he was gone. And then I heard, and I know it was a friend of mine because I sort of recognized the voice, but I can't place the name, yelling Weaver real loud to get in here from a gear locker, which was close by. And I couldn't move. I couldn't go backwards, So he come out and he risked his life to pull me in. And I never got to thank him, and I'm thanking him now, wherever he was. And he got under my arms, pulled me inside this compartment. And then he saw, when he did that, well, things started coming out, and he just pushed in and then stuffed the hole in my side with his shirt. And then they moved me and some other wounded into the bulkhead. Into the companionway, which is a walkway inside the ship. It was on the deck level, but it had more protection because there were different compartments that had steel bulkheads, and you were safer there. And there was a line of stretchers of all of us there. And it was amazing. I said this before, that it sounded like some kind of a chant, an Oriental or whatever. I just don't know what kind of a chant you'd say to be. But we're all praying, and we're all praying out loud. And it sounded like just like that, over and over. And and I stopped praying. I heard this, and I'll never forget that sound of all of us praying in unison, and not knowing what was going to happen when we were on that ship trapped. And they had me tied down in the stretcher, type of stretcher, that way you wouldn't move or roll out when they had to carry you or move you. And there's something I want to bring up later, but I'm just going to touch on it and just say it a couple times, and then I'll bring it back in. No man left behind. No man left behind. No man left behind. And Washington deserted us that day and every day since. And they speak on the hill how America works, that they don't leave anybody in the battlefield. No man left behind. Anyway, I'll get back to that later, but anyway, they started moving us down to the med sticks, and the doc was going all around. He was just overwhelmed. Corpsmen were doing whatever they could, and some men, were there, and good friends of mine, actually. That was their last minutes of life. A good friend of mine, Ronald Kukul, was stating about going around and doing what he could do to help. And just how that sight was welded in his brain all these years. And some of the men that he talked to, that were the last words they heard was coming from him. Every man on that ship has PTSD to a limit that it's hard to explain. And anyway, they were hitting me with battle dressing morphine, which is a pace. It's they shoot in your leg in a big muscle. And I had 3 or 4 inside of 12 hours. And because different corpsmen and then somebody else would come and give me one, and it's hard to lose count. I mean, it's easy to lose count, but it's a wonder I didn't die from that, because that would be a morphine overdose. As I find out later on that morphine doesn't affect me like other people, thank God. And anyhow, I was laying there, and I remember the captain gave the order, anybody has any booze, they can now break it out. There will be no kind of charges made or anything. Well, thank God. It's funny to laugh about, and I laughed even then, not out loud, but it was amazing how many bottles of booze came down to that mess deck. And I was so pissed because they didn't have any scotch. They had all this bourbon and everything on, and I know this is, maybe not important in the story, but this is just part of it, part that goes along with it, and it binds in. And I drank some bourbon, and then, well, naturally, with the way I was wounded so bad, it just came right back up, and what did go down just leaked out because of the intestine, colon damage and stuff. And anyhow, we had to wait 17 hours before we got evacuated by chopper to America. 17 hours. Johnson was waiting and hoping that we would sink. 17 hours. We were there, and men were dying. Men were dying who probably didn't have to die. And I was doing my best, and I did not to close my eyes, because I just knew if I did that I would never open them again.
Richard, let me ask you this, because you made an important point there, and I want to point this out. I know a lot of guys died in the initial attack, but how many men do you think died needlessly in this wait for assistance that took entirely too long?
Well, I'll tell you, some of my other shipmates might know better because they were going around helping, but my guesstimate would be probably, I'd say probably 6 anyhow. And because I knew one was a real close buddy of mine, and another one, and I'm guessing, maybe the high number that needlessly it would probably be somewhere around 6, maybe 5 or 6. But that is just a guesstimate. But
Well, when I say
anyhow,
needlessly, they all should. None of them should have perished at all. But I mean that even if the administration at the time tried to say, "Well, it was a surprise attack and we didn't know," they're lollygagging and they're turning back the jets and they're meddling. We can get into that later. But the point is, that means they're at least responsible for the death of 6 individuals. So the president at the time, Johnson, is at least responsible for the murder of 6 people. I'm just saying. That's me saying it. That's not Richard. I just wanted to clarify that because that's an important point. You guys were left out there, and like you said before, no man left behind, and they left you on the battlefield. They left you guys out there.
I'll tell you, Johnson was responsible for every damn one because he gave the order to the U.S.S. Amberjack to torpedo us. So 25 men were instantly blown up. So Johnson was responsible for all of it. Period.
And I wanted to, we're going to get into the Amberjack as well, because we touched on it a little bit the last time, but I wanted to give you as much time as you want to talk about that as well, because that's apparently I could understand why. It's I guess a controversial topic when it comes to this, and something that not many people that have heard the story of the Liberty have even heard that section, that there might have been another U.S. vessel involved with the actual attack on the ship itself. We have about 5 minutes before we go to break, so do you want to expand on the Amberjack a little bit?
Okay, I'll just do that quickly. That the nuclear-powered submarine was stationed 1 mile off our starboard side. Okay, very quickly, my records were so messed up, I hired a special investigator, and he was really good with people, and he got to talk to somebody, knew somebody, and he found out these 2 crew members were on an Amberjack. And one would arm the torpedoes, and the other one was on the bridge in charge of firing the torpedoes under the captain's orders. Anyhow, they got the order to arm the torpedo, and the other guys up in the torpedo room said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I got the order to arm number 3. And then shortly after that, the captain gave the other guy the order to fire. And a lot of people might find it controversial. I don't, because the tapes are. I'm not telling you where they're at. Anyhow, with that said, if you're listening or know anybody that might know these 2 crewmen, they could put all this to sleep right now as far as any kind of controversy. I'm asking you deep in my heart for you guys to come forward and get in touch with Down the Rabbit Hole or whatever means, and go on record. Because this is a part of naval history that needs to be written, of just how ruthless Washington can be sometimes, that they will have a nuclear-powered submarine fire on one of its own ships. This really happened, folks. But please, you 2 crewmen, will you do me that favor? Because to have it on tape, yeah, but they can say, well, I could have had 2 guys, from Louisiana or someplace like that, just do the tapes. How do they know? Please, will you guys please come forward? This will help with your PTSD, as you said to my investigator, because they have it too, because of withholding that kind of knowledge got to them. I think that's all I can say about that, is just to plead with them to come forward. And, are you there?
Dan, wow, your investigator actually found these guys and spoke to them, and
oh yes, he spoke to them, and then they told him what happened. And he said, "Would you go on tape?" And they both said no. And a year and a half later, they got in touch with my investigator, and they both agreed. Said, "Man, I don't know what it is, PTSD, whatever." They had so much guilt because of what they were ordered to do, and they were under orders to do it. That they said, "Yes, we'll go on tape," and he got it on tape.
I would make multiple copies of.
these people, I'm sure at least one of them is alive yet, for sure.
I would
Maybe
make
both of them.
I would make multiple copies of those tapes and distribute them out all over the place and like in different hiding spots. Because I mean, if that
Yeah, I have several tapes like that. I have a tape about me, more personal stuff and everything else. That if something happens to me, my wife knows, and other people, and they're hidden, to take them to the local news TV station immediately if I would die under suspicious cause. Yes. No, I believe in that. And but anyway, it happened, folks. It happened. Believe me.
that's a really unnerving thought to think that I know. Look, you and I are both in the military. We both understand the following orders thing, but that really unnerves me. And I know that it's happened before, but it's just unnerving to know that in the middle of an attack by somebody else on one of our vessels, that our own there is a possibility here. For those of you that are like not convinced, okay. There's a possibility here that one of our own American vessels fired on another one of our vessels and killed our own sailors and Marines. I mean, doesn't that
Well, they
bother
ran out
anybody?
of torpedoes. They completely ran out of torpedoes and headed back to port. Everyone missed.
The gunboats, you mean?
They were French built. Yes, they were French built, and they weren't very accurate, and they came close, very close, but none of them hit. And then there was a lull when they took off. Because they were hightailing it, and then we got hit with a torpedo. So the torpedoes were en route to go back to port, and then we got hit with a torpedo. Where did the torpedo come from?
Well,
I'm just asking that question. Where did it come from if there wasn't a torpedo boat there?
And the first time you told me about the Amberjack was the first time I had ever heard it. And then I did some research, and I had seen this not really out there, but I had found one or two other references across the internet, and I was just look, as a retired sailor myself, I don't even know how to describe it in words. I know you know what I mean, Richard. I don't know how to describe it in words that an American vessel, an American captain would willingly, and knowingly fire on another American vessel. And I know it's happened before. It just, every time you see stuff like this, I don't know how to explain it to you people, to the people that weren't in the military. It's frustrating on so many levels. Anyway, break sneaking up on us. Do not go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. Hour 1 flew by, but hour 2 is coming right up. When we get back, we will pick it up right there where we're leaving off. Waiting for rescue. Look up the USS Liberty. Richard's also interested in writing a book. Anybody that knows any publishers, let me know. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. It's June 6th, 2014, and tonight I am joined by my good friend, my brother sailor, brother veteran, Richard Larry Weaver, survivor of the attack on the U.S.S. Liberty. If you do not know about the U.S.S. Liberty, ladies and gentlemen, a quick and simple search of the ship's name, U.S.S. Liberty, will bring up a ton of links. I urge you to do your research. This is very real. This ship was attacked, and these men were left and abandoned. Like Richard said earlier, no man left behind. This was a post, by the way, and we're going to get into this later, but every time he posted it on Facebook, Facebook is literally blocking the posts of. And we're going to get into that a little bit later, and we're going to, we're going to touch on the whole thing about no man left behind, and actually he's got something to read about it, and I'm going to give him some time to read that. But I want to get right back into it where we were because we got cut off. So he was discussing that, they were left behind by LBJ, and the rescue planes that were called back, and they waited believe it was another 17 hours for rescue. How many sailors, Marines needlessly perished because they were waiting for help, even if it was one. And none of them should have perished at all. None of them. Not one of them. Remember, this was supposedly one of our allies that attacked us, the nation-state of Israel. You heard Richard say in the beginning, the first segment, that when they first saw the Israeli jets, or they first saw the jets, and they were able to tell that one of them was Israeli. They were happy because they okay, it's an ally, and I say that term loosely. I couldn't even stomach to get the word out of my mouth. You see, I had to hesitate to say it. That wasn't dramatic pause. I actually couldn't get the word out of my mouth. And this isn't anti-Semitism. This is the people that run the government of that nation state, just like the people that run the government of our nation state are evil, okay, and bad. Doesn't mean you're anti-American if you think that our government sucks. You're not. Use your head. That stuff is said to keep you away from even talking about this or looking at this or even talking about the liberty in general. Anyway, I digress. So, Richard, you guys are shot up by the grace of God and Captain McGonagall's constant drilling with damage control and how to keep the ship afloat. And like I said, I don't know how else to put it, but except by the grace of God or angels or whatever, some higher power that day was looking out for you guys and kept you alive. So you guys are floating out there. It was 17 hours, correct? You were waiting for rescue after the attack?
Yes, but something I wanted to touch on when you said how could a president fire on his own American ship? In my opinion, very easily. Because June 8, 1967, we had no ally. Israel was not our ally. It was the attacking enemy. Washington was not our ally. They called back planes, jet planes, fighter planes, on the way to help us. And then the U.S.S. Saratoga relaunched another squadron. And those planes were also called back and let us sit there. And the attack of the U.S.S. Liberty, I don't know if I mentioned, lasted just about as long as the attack on Pearl Harbor. We had no allies that day. We still don't have Washington as an ally because we have lost, or so far, our constitutional right to testify on our own behalf. They take the word of Israel that was the enemy. I don't care if they call them ally or what. They were the enemy. When you're on deck or in a ship or whatever, and you're sort of trapped out in the water, and somebody's shooting torpedoes at you and napalm and everything else, I don't care what country they're from, they are the enemy. And if you're on that ship with me, you're going to agree, yeah, they're the enemy. But Washington, to call them back, that didn't work. The Liberty was still afloat. They ran out of torpedoes. Now you're heading back. Nothing worked. I can understand easily. Johnson stated in the Oval Office to Admiral Moore, who I talked to personally at different reunions, and he also explained, at the podium at different reunions, that the attack was deliberate. And that Johnson, in the Oval Office during this time when Admiral Moore was the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said in the Oval Office, and Admiral Moore heard this, that I want that ship on the bottom and every sailor killed. Now, I said before, the last time, there was a president out of control. I think this guy was very much in control. I think that him saying he did not want to embarrass an ally, how did he know they were an ally? I said this before, but I want to really take my time and say it. How did he know they were an ally? The planes were painted in camouflage. I could see them. I didn't know if they were Russian. I didn't know who they were. I just knew they were the enemy. but yet he didn't want to embarrass an ally. In my opinion, I feel that Johnson and Moshe Dayan got together and had this ploy made up. Okay, you can attack her, just make sure you sink her, and then you can blame it on Egypt, and it will come to your aid, and they would have so much Egyptian land. Think about it. Think how they have treated the Palestine people. Israel, and some of you people, you can take it the wrong way if you want, but this is the truth. Israel kills at will, and Washington turns a blind eye. If there was ever any other country that was doing the carnage to another people, their houses, their land, killing babies, killing children, anywhere else in the world, the United States would be outraged. But it happens almost every day, and Israel keeps killing. And what do you hear in the media? Nothing. It's not allowed to be reported. So yeah, I can see why Johnson did it. It's mainly because the crew of the U.S.S. Liberty sets the milestone as far as the saying of "Don't give up the ship." Well, they ought to have the picture of the Liberty and the Liberty crew above that saying, because they epitomize of not giving up the ship. And another thing with that said, the U.S.S. Liberty was a turn of the tide in American history and naval history, that when Israel found out that they could get away with murdering basically defenseless sailors, and Washington would believe them and not give us a chance to testify, Israel knew they had Washington in their back pockets, and they still do. And that's why the lobbyists and everything else, it gets very, very political that I'm not familiar with, but I know how it doesn't work today, because the country my dad helped defend doesn't exist anymore. So just remember, that was a turning point in history, and there's a whole lot that went on with 9/11. They're going to keep finding out, and I'm not going into that, but I tell you, folks, June the 8th, 1967, eventually will be a landmark as far as that sort of the demise of what this country used to be. So I'm going to say about that.
And well, since we're already on the subject of why LBJ would have torpedoed the ship, why do you think Israel attacked?
Why? Why did they attack the Palestinians? All a question of land. They're only as big as New Jersey, my God. And, you know, they have, 36 or 40 nuclear weapons? Now, they don't, tell or let any inspectors in, and they're our ally? Come on, not to figure out they want more land and more, more water or whatever else. It's just that simple. And control of oil in the Mideast, there's so much that goes on that is hidden from us. But I'm tired of this being hidden from us. We deserve our day to testify under oath and get, I don't know if I should bring this up now about No Man Left Behind or not. I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this, and then we can get into that. Let me ask you this. Do you think, because I asked Ernie this last week, but I want your opinion on this, and I already know, but for the benefit of the newer listeners, why do you think, well, let me rephrase this. Do you think it's true that you were attacked by Israel, perhaps because you, being the ship that you guys were, could have intercepted communications, like the walkie-talkie communications, and you guys might have picked up on the fact that they were committing war crimes with Egyptian soldiers, captured Egyptian soldiers? Is that a possibility? One of the reasons, do you think, that they could have attacked you?
Yes, I wasn't in communication. That is a possibility, but they committed war crimes against the U.S.S. Liberty by machine gunning lifeboats that did get in the water. They committed war crimes there. In fact, the U.S.S. Liberty Association filed war crimes and jumped through every legal hoop in Washington and it ended up they couldn't find paperwork or something. That's some lame excuse that it never came to be. So yeah, I agree with that, but you got to remember the other side of it. Why would Johnson say he didn't want to embarrass an ally? Why would he know they were Israeli? Why would he know that? And something else I'm going to throw in here that a lot of people don't know this, but my investigator found out somehow, and it did come out in the media for a short bit and then died off, that he found out that Russia had 3 ships in sort of the northern eastern Mediterranean sitting there and watching all this. Fact is, in that 17 hours, we were waiting, a Russian ship come up and offered help. And the captain said, "Thank you, but no thank you." That was the Liberty was offered help by a Russian ship before our own ships, because Johnson was waiting for it to sink. But anyway, Russia had 3 ships. They were all armed with nuclear warheads, and it was said that if the United States would have come around and started to help Israel invade Egypt, there would be no more Israel. They were going to wipe it off the map with their small nuclear weapons. That was going to be the fact, and that would have been World War III. In my opinion, that is exactly what happened, and according to my investigator, the facts that he found out that they, yes, in fact, were on duty there.
There's so much. Again, I had heard the story of the Liberty, the Israelis attacking it, but until I had gotten a chance to talk to you, I never even would have thought that there would have been an American vessel involved in this whole fray. I mean, I know that Johnson wanted the ship to go to the bottom because he, quote unquote, didn't want to embarrass an ally, but again, like you said, how did he know it was an ally if it was a surprise attack and they didn't know about, you know what I mean? So it's just... wow. But does it surprise me that they would sacrifice our own men? No. I mean, they do this constantly. Look what they did on 9/11 with the civilians then. They killed over 3,000 people. They don't care. The ends justify the means, right?
Well, they threatened the crewmen. They talked about it to anybody with prison or worse. And I didn't get my threat because I wasn't on the ship, because I was getting operations and fly hopping on the way back to Philadelphia. I was in Philadelphia, and I was getting out of intensive care and still fighting for my life at that time, because these were very intense operations. I'm not going to go into them, but anyway, I was just out of intensive care and settled in my bunk and everything, and naturally they were, giving me a medication, all this stuff. And then the corpsman come over and said, "An admiral wants to see you downstairs." First thing I said was, "What the hell did I do?" And then they had the bottles and stuff. They didn't have the plastic bags back then. Anyhow, they took 3 guys and they got me in a wheelchair. And believe me, when you have got core destruction like I had, laying down is bad enough. But boy, when they sit you in a chair, it's just unreal, the pain. Anyhow, they got me in the chair, and then one guy pushed the chair, and 2 guys, one on each side, pushing these bottles on rollers. And they got me downstairs, went down the elevator, and then pushed me in this room. It was about 10 by 10. And in walks this admiral, and I saw all this brass, and I wanted to snap his attention, naturally, automatic, just, from being in the service, and I couldn't. And it was Admiral Isaac Kidd. He was a 3-star admiral then. And he said, "Are you Richard Larry Weaver?" I said, "Yes, sir." He closed the door, and then he deadbolted it. And I got concerned, because I didn't know what was going to happen. And believe me, if I knew what was really happening, he could have had a silencer plug me in the head, and that'd have been it, and, story over. Anyway, I was sitting there, and then after I told him my full name, and then he started taking the stars off. And he put them on the table there. He said, "Look," then he got real casual. He said, "Look, Richard," he said, "I'm just a man like you. Tell me what you saw." Well, my location on the U.S.S. Liberty at the time of the air attack I was the best eyewitness on the whole U.S.S. Liberty because I was so far aft, I could see what was going on. I could see the flag. Like I said, it was in the way at different times, but I could see it all. And I told the Admiral this, and I told him what I saw, told him they were unmarked, everything that I knew. Then he said, okay, and he put his stars back on. He said, now I'm an Admiral again. And that's when he threatened me. And he walked out, and I thought, my God, I'm all screwed up for my country, and he sort of treated me like a criminal. I was wondering what's up with that. And he made a special trip out of his day, a 3-star Admiral, to come and see me. And from that moment on, I know a red flag was raised against my name. As far as I got a regular separation, they lied and said I had a physical at the Navy Yard that I never had, and the physical stated that I was in good health for duty. My records at the Philadelphia Naval Hospital, I had to stay something like 14 extra days or something like that because I wasn't physically well enough to be separated. And the doctors there, I have it right in my den, wrote in there that Richard received extensive nerve damage in the right side of his body and his back, and loss of use of the right hand and muscular loss in the right leg. You know, a lot of detailed stuff they went into. And they said the total of his disabilities we won't know until he gets further tests later. That's what it read. And the other one that they made up and fraudulently put in my record, you know, said that I was ready for duty. I got back to Lancaster, PA, where I was born and raised. 2 weeks I was supposed to report for reserve duty because I went immediate active duty. And I went in and Commander Doherty was there and shook his hand. And when I shake hands, I can only shake with my thumb and my index finger. And he just sort of grabbed my hand and looked at it. And he said, I said, sir, I'm here to report for my reserve time. And he said, well, Richard, he said, your reserve time is hereby waived. He said, your disabilities are too much that there's no way that you could do your reserve time, and if you had any thoughts of making the Navy a career, that's hereby waived too. You can't do that. Well, I found out, jumping ahead, 2005, Admiral Starring, who was the Judge Advocate General, told me at a lunch about disability retirement, and he told me right at that moment, by command, Commander Doherty should have told me about disability retirement, give me the paperwork to fill out, and receive that until the VA, which I didn't know anything about the VA because it was crossed out in my DD-214. DD-214 said I only had a service medal. They didn't say any other medals like the Purple Heart and so on. And it didn't say I was on the ship. My duty rosters showed boot camp. It showed the U.S.S. Kaskaskia. And the next duty station was the U.S.S. America. That time in between did not exist in my life. Liberty never appeared anywhere. And the DD-214, for you people out there that didn't serve, is a very, very important paper that you need to hang on the rest of your life. And they gave me a regular separation. It took me 5 hours to get separated. Everybody else came in and gone in an hour and a half. So somebody was working on that somewhere higher up at what to do with this guy. And then finally, a friend of my dad's, he gave me a job that I could do, and he asked me how the VA's treat me. I said, what's the VA? Well, he gave me a dime and told me to call my congressman. I happened to catch Congressman Eshelman, and he was unnerved about this, and he made it I would get evaluated in Harrisburg within days, and I did. And I got in there, and that was a sham. Like I said, a red flag behind my name, or in front of my name. I went in there. He never took a vital. never took an X-ray. He just saw I was on the U.S.S. Liberty, and he wanted to know what happened. 15 minutes I was out of there. He gave me a very low disability rate, and I was gone. When I first saw a doctor in the Lebanon VA, he looked at me and said, "Richard, what the hell are you doing this percentage?" I said, "You tell me." And he told me just what to do as far as the appeal system. And I appealed. I appealed for 29 years. It was 29 years until I got a fair and just evaluation. And when that evaluation come through, and I got a fair evaluation, I felt, because it was permanent and static, because I still carry over 60 pieces of shrapnel in my body today, plus 34 major surgeries on the way. And I feel it was just, and I said, "Well, how far back does this go?" He said, "The last appeal." I said, "What do you mean?" And he looked up and said, "Well, it's a year and a half." I said, whoa. I said, "That appeal was on an appeal the whole way back to like something like around 69. He said, "Well, our system don't work that way. We don't go back that far." I said, "Well, you know what? I served my country. If I was in an automobile wreck, and we've been in a court all these 29 years, and all of a sudden it was the judge found it in favor of me, they'd go back to the car accident, wouldn't they?" He said, "Yep." I said, "Then why doesn't the VA or Washington go back? I've been dealing with this all my life. It changed my life in a split second. Why is it you're telling me it only goes back to the last appeal?" So ever since I was a kid, bam, I was stamped. And I know this because some of my other shipmates got their 100% much sooner. They told me about it, and they didn't have the difficulty. And I'm sure maybe there are some, and I'm sure there's some that didn't put in the PTSD, which they should, because it's there. And if you don't get it treated and get taken care of, it's a cancer. I mean, I hit the wall, and my first marriage was sacrifice. I was married 24 years, and I hit that wall, and bang. I wasn't Richard Larry Weaver for about a year and a half. I did things I would have never done before, and was suicidal, and it just the way it works until you start to deal with it.
Well, perhaps you wouldn't have been that way if you guys weren't abandoned either. And that whole thing about the VA, just so you know, we're going to come up to a break here, but just so you know, the whole thing about the VA, Richard, is, aside from the process of appeals and all that, that's separate. You already know that's horrific. But their reimbursement of them only going back like 2 years, that's their standard operating procedure. That's their SOP. They only go back 2 years. So if you put in a claim and they drag it out for 20 years and the guy was homeless for 10 years because of whatever, it does not matter to them. According to now, like you said, if it went to a civil court, they would date it all the way back to the initial date, even if it was 20 years. And that's not how the VA works. Even if they drag it out 20, 30 years, they only date it back 2 years. Do you get any retro type of payment? So that's another way that they kill veterans. Okay? Another wait list, if you will. I told you all on multiple shows already about the VA. This is an ongoing problem. So they'll drag Richard's case out for over 30 years, almost 30 years, and then they only go back a year and a half. Really nice. Way to take care of our veterans. Real nice. Stay tuned. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment with my guest tonight, Richard Larry Weaver. And before we get into the next part of the broadcast, which we're going to talk about, his this piece that he keeps posting on Facebook, and Facebook literally keeps censoring it, because I was on Facebook last night with him for like an hour trying to see this thing, and they were literally blocking it, and I'm now seeing other people experiencing the same thing again, so Facebook must be up to their antics. But before we even we get into that, I want to do something. I promised Richard I would do this, and I did this the last time I had him on. And it's been hectic because he had some, I believe he had a couple surgeries since the last time. So it's he had to recover from that. And I've had 10 in the past 4.5 years myself. So I know how it feels to be going from one to the other. It really knocks the crap out of you. But when he was on the last time, we put out this call for anybody that knows any publishers, anybody that's maybe a writer, would like to sit down and kind of work with him on doing a type of biography, getting his story. He wants to put his story into print, not just some ebook. Type it up and make a PDF, Popeye. No. He wants to get a printed book of his story out there. And it's really hard to get this printed because unless it's an independent publishing house, nobody really wants to touch this because, it talks bad of Israel and, you can't do that. And besides, all of the media, the big publishing houses are controlled anyway. So he has to go to somebody small, but he needs somebody to help him write it. So, it could be presented to Trine Day or one of these other little publishing houses, Skyhorse Publishing, whoever. But in order to even get it to there, he needs someone to help him write it. So I'm going to let Larry give you his whatever contact information he wants to give you, like an email or whatever's the best way for you to get in touch with him, okay, or however he feels comfortable. But I want you to contact him, however, even if he wants you to go through me. I don't have a problem with that, but it's up to him, not me. I want you to be able to help him. So if there's anybody out there that can write, anybody that's an author, whatever, please contact him because this story needs to get out. Richard's story needs to be told. We need to tell the world about the story of the U.S.S. Liberty, and I'm pretty sure that you're going to be hard-pressed to find any action movie or any novel that could elicit the emotions of listening to what Richard went through. The incoming fire, the rockets, what he witnessed. And this is important that we get this down on paper. So I urge from the bottom of my heart, okay, and this is very sincere, not just because Richard's a friend of mine, but because he's a fellow sailor and a veteran and someone I respect, and I'm honored to have him on my broadcast. I urge, if you're a writer, please reach out to him or me or however, and I'll let him throw it out there, however you can contact him. We need to get his story on paper and in print. So let's work to do this. Richard, how can anybody get in, or how would you prefer that they get in contact with you?
Well, the last time they got in contact with you and you screened for me, and that was great. And what happened is I had like 6 or 8 people call and leave a message and everything, contact them. And then, I was going to get to them and I forgot. And I went back and they were all dropped off of my message, computer message thing somehow. They were all either dropped off or somehow maybe somebody in DC hit a button and just erased them. I don't know. But I would be sure to check, write them down whenever I would get them. If you would screen them, I'd appreciate that. And if somebody from England, I think that would be the best place because it would probably be easier to get everything done that way than all the bureaucracy that floats around and is controlled by Washington and Israel. You got to just put the truth right out there.
What I'll do is I'll throw my email out there.
There's too much to cover. There's just too much to cover. There's too many side stories, like I said before. There's too many side stories, and that just sort of become the roots that support the whole tree of the story.
Well, that's why you need a book. That's why you need a book, because you could actually break each one of those side stories, the roots, into a little. Or not a little, a paragraph, or a chapter of its own, so that people could read it and understand it, and then whoever the publisher could, the editor could put it together in an understandable format or whatever. But if you want to go through me like we did the last time, that's fine. Anybody that wants to help Richard out, email me. I'll give you the full email. Okay, you ready? This is the full email. The word contact, the full word spelled out, contact. And then DTRH@yahoo.com. So the full word, contact, DTRH@yahoo.com. I'll say it one more time really slow because For some reason, people seem to have an issue with this email, and I don't know why. I tried to make it as simple as I possibly could. Contact, spell the full word out, DTRH at yahoo.com. Email me if you're interested in helping Richard write a book, and I'll, if you're real, I'll screen like I did the last time, and then Richard, I'll send them to you, and then we can get this going, and hopefully we can get your book printed and going, because, like I said, your story needs to be told.
I appreciate it so much, because my son is on my butt, Brian, to get this out before something happens to me. He said my life, he said, would be an inspiration to a lot of people, and coming from him, that means a lot to me. Anyway, if it's okay, I'd like to talk about No Man Left Behind, the post that, was being blocked.
Please do.
Okay. Well, this is what I wrote for Facebook, and I'm going to tear this apart after I read it. No Man Left Behind. Washington deserted the crew of the U.S.S. Liberty June 8, 1967. Washington called back American fighter planes that were supposed to help us. The attack lasted about as long as the Pearl Harbor attack. Washington is still deserting us. No man left behind. Obama, step up and right this terrible wrong and let the crew of the U.S.S. Liberty testify what really happened June 8, 1967. We were threatened with prison or worse if we talked. President Obama, don't you desert the crew of the U.S.S. Liberty too. No man left behind. Washington took the word of the enemy, Israel. No man left behind. Richard Larry Weaver, DAV, combat wounded survivor of the U.S.S. Liberty. Now, what I want to hit on here is the length that Washington went to get this guy out of the hands of the Taliban. I guess that's who it was. And the risk there were some lives lost before, which is ironic. You don't hear them mentioned or honored. But anyway, Washington embraced them at the White House. The father got hugged, the mother got hugged, and were embraced, and they were so thankful. And this is one person. I'm not making light of one person. When does the U.S. Liberty get embraced by Washington by saying, yes, let these men testify? The truth is the truth, no matter who an ally is or isn't. And the reaction or whatever happens because of this is because this truth has been snuffed out so long. And I know Israel doesn't want this done, and they'll do everything they can to stop it. That's my opinion of it. But I feel we, as veterans and combat wounded veterans, we deserve the right to testify. That to just put a stop to the idea of listening to the enemy. And as I explained before, anybody that's coming at you with rocket and cannon fire and torpedoes or whatever, they are your enemy. So I asked, President Obama not to desert the crew of the U.S.S. Liberty too. I mean, if you're going all this length to get this one guy out, why in the hell don't we mean something? Washington has ignored us for 47 years. I mean, he ignored us. We're men too, and we have feelings too in our families, and the ones who were murdered. Kids come up to me and they want to know what their daddy was like. These are all people. And you seem so compassionate when you're hugging these parents. Where's your compassion when it comes to us? Where's your compassion? It's the absolute least that you can do is let us testify. And something other people might not know, the U.S.S. Liberty is the most decorated naval ship in history since World War II. And yet, we don't exist in the eyes of Washington, D.C.
Think about that for a second. I want the listeners to think about what Richard just said. The most decorated ship for, a single engagement or whatever they would call it. And since World War II, to date, by the way. And you don't hear about it in history books. My father was in the Navy. He was an Airedale, and he was in the Navy for 4 years. And I told him about the Liberty a couple years ago. I told him about your story, and he had no clue. He had no idea. Never heard of the Liberty. And my father's a bit of a military historian. He's he knows a lot about Navy ships, a lot about Navy history. Never heard of Liberty. Could not believe when first he thought I was lying to him. He thought he got angry, and he didn't believe me. And I gave him the information, and his jaw hit the floor. And then he went from not believing me to being pissed off that he had never heard of this and that it had been whitewashed. And then I told him I said, yeah, the captain of the ship got the Congressional Medal of Honor. He said, well, I never heard of that. I never, Of course, there was the ceremony where usually the president gives that. I said, yeah, the Secretary of the Navy gave it to him. I think it was at the Navy Yard, if I remember correctly. I mean, talk about being disrespectful.
Yes, I know. Am I on the air now?
Yeah, go right ahead. You got the floor.
Okay. Well, I got to tell you how. I just got one of the medals at that particular time. The other ones come, but anyhow, in different means. I was called down to the Master at Arms, and this is when I could. I was able to walk around some, which was good for me because I wanted to rehabilitate the best I could, as soon as possible. But anyway, it was toward the end, and I was called down to the Master at Arms, which is a place where usually you're in trouble. They called me down there, and the Master at Arms said, asked me, "You're Richard Larry Weir?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Where were you?" I said, "I was up on the 6th floor." He said, "No." He said, "Over the weekend, there was an admiral called your name out 3 times, and you didn't answer. They wanted to give you your Purple Heart." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what." I said, "I was on the U.S.S. Liberty." I said, "All my Navy blues were blown to hell." I said, "I don't have any. I didn't have any." I said, "I've been walking around in hospital gowns ever since then." "Well, this admiral is really upset that you did not come forward when he called your name 3 times. And I said, and I happened to look back on the shelf. I said, "Are they mine in the back there, those medals?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I'll tell you what." I said, "There wasn't any admiral within miles of me, probably on the America and Saratoga, yeah, but within miles of me on the deck aft on the U.S.S. Liberty, not anywhere close when I earned those medals." I said, "I don't need any damn admiral having a Photoshop of me getting one pinned on and him smiling." I said, "He wasn't there then. He don't have to be there." I said, "Can you give me the damn things?" He said, "Yeah." And that's how I got them. But I didn't receive any punishment. I just walked away. I thought, "You're going to give me punishment. You're going to come after me."
Can I be honest with you,
So
Richard? I think your way of receiving them was way better and way cooler than and way just more real than some admiral taking, like you said, a photo opportunity to smile, here I am with a heroic Navy sailor. Where was this guy when you guys were under attack? Where was he when you guys were waiting for 17 hours?
Well, let me share another thing. My best friend in the Navy, Larry Soper, who's no longer with us, by the way, which died a suspicious death, by the way, to me, in my opinion, he was murdered in the VA because the nurse came in, his wife was there, and his wife asked this nurse what she had, and she said, "Well, you can't give it to Larry. He's allergic to that." And she just plugged him in the arm. That was it. 6 minutes, he was dead. She tried to find a nurse. Nowhere. He was dead. Anyway, he's my best friend in the Navy. It was so sad to hear the way he went out because he couldn't get pain medication from the VA. And so he went on the street to get Demerol, and he got a dirty needle, and he ended up with AIDS, and he battled that and went experimental, to make it short, and boom, he hit on something, and he came out to San Diego at one of our reunions, and I saw him and his wife there. And he said, I got good news there. I said, what's that? He said, I'm free. I'm free of all, they can't find any AIDS in my body. And he was so happy with that. And then when he got back, he caught a cold, and they always bring him in the hospital quick, at the VA hospital, to keep a check on him, you know. And that's when he was killed. Anyway, Larry was at the San Diego reunion, and we were talking because we were best of friends. And actually, we were on my first ship together, Chicaskia. He said, Larry, I got to tell you something. I said, what's that? And he opened up this little box. I said, oh, your Purple Heart. He said, yeah. He said, guess how I got it? I said, well, how? He said, it was mailed to me. I said, what? He said, yeah, it was mailed to me. I said, look, the captain and I are pretty tight ever since going to reunions. We really, really had so many personal conversations. I just love the man to death. I really do. Still, always will. I said, just a second, Larry. And I went to the captain and got him aside and explained the situation. I said, would you do the honor of pinning Larry's Purple Heart on him? And he said, sure. And Larry looked so proud when he got that from the captain. Instead of opening up a box from the U.S. mail. Our captain was a class act, I tell you. Anyway, I'm glad I had something to do about that, but it was sad after he got home what happened to him. But he was up on the 03 level, and he was another good eyewitness, by the way. Yes.
You think he was? You think he was? You think he was murdered?
That's my opinion, and that's his wife's opinion. She called up here, and that's how I found out. She was bawling. Said, they killed Larry. They killed Larry. I said, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And she told me just what I told you. She didn't recognize the nurse. They could put anybody in, like a white dress and nurse's outfit, and somebody come in, and that's just her job in the government. I mean, they say conspiracy bullshit. I'm sorry about the language, but I'm tired of that. Another word, conspiracy, is the truth of the matter. And they label it the other thing because they don't want to hear the truth of the matter. And I said this before, D.C. is not worried about terrorists. D.C. is worried about the truth. If the truth comes out, it's just crazy. Like, you were saying before about me fighting the VA for 29 years. Through my investigator and research of my own, if a congressman or a woman dies, the spouse gets the same rate of pay as if the congressman was still alive and getting his pay. And it was researched back through why. And they come up with the reason that he or she is used to that standard of living. That's why. What about the men and women that have died in harm's way? What kind of their standard of living goes to nothing when they lose their spouse. And they lost their loved one. But they want her chauffeured around and Secret Service or whatever. Nothing changes except for loss. And that's bad enough. I'm not negating that at all. But they talk about the 1%ers, and there's just still, it's not black or white. It's still a segregation of we want to be up here, and boy, we're going to push you others down. You be the supporting group that makes everything nice for us. You fight our wars and everything else, but we want the limousines. We deserve that because we're in office. I'd still think, man, every man for sure. Every man that serves in any kind of office should put his time in serving his country in one of the branches of the service. Then he might have an idea how to do the right thing.
Yeah, and they might not be so quick to send young men off to fight and die for lies.
Oh, yes. And I know this might sound funny to some people, but, this is a scenario, and this is how I believe in my heart, so I'm allowed to share that. That if we had an all-women Congress and Senate and a woman president, because women carry life in their bodies and give life, they have that compassion for life. I bet you that if that our government was run like that from the time of after our forefathers, I bet we wouldn't have been in 1/10 of the wars that we have been in, because like it or not, and it happens, some men are not as bad as others, but boy, ego. Man has an ego, and he will sacrifice thousands for him to look good. And that's just a fact, where a woman has the compassion. How much compassion do you think Johnson had about Vietnam and the liberty? How much do you think?
Well, from what I know, he had none.
That's why I'm appealing to Obama to not to desert the crew now. He has a chance to make history and help us. Somebody got to start it. We have tried every route that we know of. So if they're going to do this for one man, Obama, you've got to do it for the U.S.S. Liberty. And I think petitions or whatever it takes, if this nation gets behind us and makes this happen, it's going to happen for a lot of other people in different ways that aren't being heard too.
A way to actually at least throw this in their face, because I doubt they'll ever really deal with this officially, but I know there's that official White House petition page where I think it's if you get over 100,000 signatures, they have to deal with it. That's the thing that whatever the rule or whatever the hell it is or whatever they said. If it gets over 100,000 signatures, they'll at least address it. So we should try to force the issue and make them address the issue of the U.S.S. Liberty, just to see what they'll say. I know that they're not going to come out and be like, we're going to investigate this. I mean, I trust me. I don't hold any hope that will happen, but it would force them to publicly say the word U.S.S. Liberty on air. They'd be forced to say the ship's name. And just saying the ship's name, like Ernie said last week, they don't even say, the name doesn't even get uttered. Not even in renaming new vessels. Because then it might bring up the history of the other ships before it. And oh my God, what happened to the other USS Liberty? Oh, it got attacked by Israel. Oh, what? Why did it get attacked by Israel? Oh, wait, there was a whitewash and a cover-up? What? People got killed and died? And then they might look into your story and hear what you have to say about the Amberjack. They might listen to what Ernie has to say. And all the other survivors. They might read the books. Oh, you can't have that. You can't have that. You can't have that, Richard. So,
but the petition, is supposed to be addressed. I agree. But I wasn't part of it. But the Liberty Association officers did a wonderful job of the logistics and everything having to do with the war crimes, and followed it to a T. And when you do charges like that, that is supposed to be, I think, congressionally pursued by law. And I think I'm right on that. And what happens when we don't have paperwork? We don't know where, and I'm pretty sure Ernie agreed with it that they offered up the paperwork that the masters or whatever that they kept. But they're going to close the door on you. What do you do when they don't own up to what is maybe already in law?
Yeah,
they are not above the law, but yet they operate that way.
Yeah, no, well, they, abusing it and acting like you're above the law and not facing any repercussions is pretty much just like being above the law. Richard, we're out of time. Thank you so much again.
Let me say one more thing. Can I say one more thing?
Go ahead. We got about 30 seconds.
It's my quote, and I don't care what they say. I said that the boys behind the Beltway is the biggest legal mafia operating in the world today. And all you got to do is think how a mafia works, and then look at how our government works. Exactly the same. You got the soldiers, the whole bit on up. That's all I have to say about that. Thanks for the time. And America, get angry. Get angry. Don't get placid about it because it doesn't affect you. Because it...
Richard, I got to cut you off because we're about to literally run out of time. Thank you so much. He's right, ladies and gentlemen. Get angry. Get pissed off. Do research. Look up the U.S.S. Liberty. Look up all the books. Authors. Email me. Help me write Richard's story.